We are psyched to be joined today by Corey Masisak, who is the San Jose Sharks beat writer and the, most importantly, for our purposes, the Timo Meier point person. Corey, we were gonna, I think, get into this whenever we talked a few weeks back, but then you were called as like a late boarder for a flight.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's what set me into an anxiety spiral, which led to the always popular Black and White Mad World remix from Danielle.
Oh God, I forgot about that. So we had to abort our plan to talk about Erik Karlsson and Timo Meier because you were in the Charlotte airport or whatever, wherever
I think
you
it
were
was
connecting,
Chicago.
whatever that was. Chicago? It was Midway? Okay, great. You are back, and Timo Meier is a bigger conversation topic than ever because we're, 8 days out from the...
8 days.
8 days. Jeez, Jesus Christ. It's coming. But the trade deadline is here. Timo Meier is still number 1A top of the list player, despite some maybe shuffling over the last couple of days.
Are you even going to let him say hello before you ask a question about
No,
Timo
I don't
Meier?
want. I don't.
Like,
know.
welcome to the show.
Hi guys.
Hey, Corey.
Corey, we're glad to have you. God bless you. I'm happy to see you. How's that?
I'm satisfied.
Okay.
There we go.
Corey,
okay, now we have some questions.
Has anything changed with the situation over the last 3 days? It seems like there's been some movement. There's teams that are getting thrown around. It's, we've heard more about the Blues. We've heard more about Vegas. But what's the movement on your end been like, this week, maybe starting with Monday?
Yeah, I think it's probably picked up some. That seems, it was a lot of the same 2 or 3 teams for, it felt like, multiple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the Blues have made some moves, and now they have some, they've sort of freed up some space. And then, even yesterday, the Vegas moving Shea Weber's contract frees up some space for them. So now you can sort of see other teams are like, hey, well, maybe we need to get involved in this. So yeah, it's been pretty busy, pretty hectic, but it's certainly, I'm sure Mike Greer is not complaining about the fact that it seems like more and more teams want to trade for one of his best players.
I think everyone kind of had this collective moment at first. In speaking yesterday about the Vegas and Arizona deal, you see the tweet and it's, sources are saying the Arizona Coyotes have traded and everyone's like, oh, it's Chychrun. There's the disappointment and the jokes about it not being the Jacob Chychrun deal. And then there's the collective realization of oh wait, crap, Shea Weber's contract is involved in this. What the hell are the Vegas Golden Knights doing here? And then the putting 2 and 2 together of oh no, they're opening up some cap space for something. Oh dear.
It is funny that they've it feels like they've almost become the league's boogeyman. They're just involved.
Yeah.
There's no way. Well, the year starts and it's oh wait, they have $137 million on their cap. Oh, don't worry, they'll still figure something out between now and Push. That. Yeah. So it does seem anytime they get involved, it's oh, okay, now.
Yeah.
Now it is.
They always have money. So I think the way Sean and I were gonna go through this, we want to talk about Meier. We want to talk about the asking price, and then we're going to evaluate some of the potential trade partners that we've heard out there. So we'll circle back on Vegas. We'll talk about who I think should be the front runner in New Jersey Devils. St. Louis.
That's all that matters, by the way. Who does Hailey think should be the front runner in this? That's what's
right.
most important.
Yeah, my New Jersey Devils should acquire Timo Meier. St. Louis, Winnipeg, Carolina. So we can dig into that in a bit, but I think we want to start a little bit zoomed out here and just look at Timo Meier and why this guy has become the belle of the ball at the deadline. And not because of it's kind of a, oh, Jonathan Toews is off the board and guys are off the board. Timo Meier's kind of been the guy because of the player that he is. So Corey, what can you tell us about Timo Meier, the player, and why people want him so badly on their team?
Yeah. It's funny. I've done a couple of these list stories where you're looking back at trades from the last 15 years. And there are trade deadlines where it's the best player traded was a number 4 defenseman. And it's oh my God.
I remember a couple of those. Yeah.
So, imagine if Vladislav Gavrikov is the best player available right now. This would not be as much fun. Timo Meier is one of the best wings in the league. He's one of the best power forwards in the league. And like, more than just like he scores lots of goals. He's kind of a really good all around player. He's got like kind of a mean streak to him. He's he's just I think he's like one of those guys that like the stats say he's really good, and then like the scouts also say that he's really good, and it just sort of like everybody just sort of lines up and says like, oh, this guy's going to be a playoff player. There's like a list of boxes, right?
He checks a lot of boxes, right? Like he's got the stat profile and the physical profile and the personality profile that it seems like a lot of folks can agree on, right?
Yeah, and he's just like really over the last 2 years. I mean, the Sharks have not had a lot of success, but he is just. There are so few nights where he's not, just very clearly like, one of their two best players. Like he's just a very consistent offensive force. He's good with the puck. He's good without the puck. He's good bringing it into the zone. He's good once he's in the zone. He just kind of does a little. He's just not like I don't know. He's just really good at a lot of different things. And I mean, obviously, the most important one is that he's going to score 40 goals this year.
I think he's a classic case too of a guy who showed up at the top of. When you're sorting for stats, whether it's on Evolving Hockey or Natural Stat Trick or whatever, for years, 3, 4, 5 years now, he's been at the top of those leaderboards, right? But it feels like what's happened over the last couple of years is the production has kind of caught up with the underlying numbers. Not that the production was bad, because he's been good in that regard, really going back for 5 years now. But it seems like he's leveled up where the actual production is more in line with. Whether it's expected or chance numbers or whatever you want to look at, the underlying stuff now matches the output, right?
Yeah, he had 30 goals and 66 points when he was 21 or 22.
Mm-hmm.
That basically the last year the Sharks were good.
Yep.
Yeah, that was his 30 and 60 year, and then he did look. He had 2 years where the traditional box score numbers just weren't the same.
Mm-hmm.
He just had a dip. And so, he had 35 goals last year. He's on pace for 44, 45 this year. Like, it has sort of he's not like a supernatural finisher. Like he wouldn't be on a list of like the best snipers in the league, but he's among the league leaders in shots on goal and shot attempts. And he creates stuff on his own. Like, I mean, that goal he scored the other night, I think that was against the Penguins, right? Was just like he literally got the puck at his own blue line and just went coast to coast and scored. He just sort of is kind of the complete package. And I mean, after looking back at the last 15 deadlines a couple times over the past couple weeks, there haven't been a lot of guys like this available who are 26 years old, and you can have there have been guys like maybe like Patrick Kane that have been available. There haven't been 26-year-old versions of this player available at the deadline, and then possibly for the next 8 years. A whole lot.
Everyone hears about the 5-on-5 production. I think that's a focal point with Meier, but he's also one of the best power play weapons in the league. He's second in goals per 60 to Leon Draisaitl on the power play over the last 2 years. Like this is, I feel like a lot gets wrapped up in, we love that he drives play at 5-on-5 and that he produces there, but with the
power play matters in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Right. Say it louder. Actually, say it louder. Don't whisper it.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's not like a guy that's like you think of like Ovechkin or Stamkos or just certain guys who have like a spot on the power play where it's like that's his like. That's not really how it works with it. Like the Sharks are pretty. I mean, their power play has been pretty effective just because they have guys that kind of you might look up and Erik Karlsson is in the bumper and Timo's on the left side now he's on the right side. So like I think. He just kind of is one of those guys that you could put him in front of the net. You can put him on the wing. He's pretty good wherever you put him on the power play.
When do we think the last time we can collectively answer this question? Sean, you can jump in too. When was the last time a guy like this was available at the deadline? Was it Mark Stone?
Yeah, I think, right? I mean,
is that the best kind of comparable here?
Was Mark Stone? Was he around that age? I don't remember. I don't know. I'm trying to think.
It's 2018-19,
okay. And
I think he had a similar contract structure as like a Kachuk, because they have the same.
He was
agent, right?
he was a pending RFA. Like he's a similar.
Yeah.
It's as close as we're gonna get. I mean, I don't know. Is that really such a bizarre situation. I don't know if that was even truly a deadline deal, right? Like that happened early in the season, didn't it? I mean,
good point.
The point is like, yeah, this guy is from a player profile and an availability standpoint, like it just doesn't happen all that often.
Right. Yeah. I mean, although you look at all the, certainly spent enough time looking for comparable trades, right? Like it's Stone, it's Alex DeBrincat at the draft last year. With the Kachuk thing, which was a kind of a unique situation. Max Pacioretty, when he got traded to Vegas, what was one of the, like maybe like Sam Reinhart, when he was traded from Buffalo to Florida was a pretty good one. But yeah, that's pretty much the neighborhood that we're talking about.
Stone was 26 years old and he had 28 goals and 62 points through 59 games this season. So it was about a month before the deadline. It was a February trade. So they're pretty comparable, and they had the deal in the drawer for him in Vegas too, right? So
how much?
Oh, Vegas. No.
Okay. We'll get to them. How much of a role does Tomas Hertl and Erik Karlsson play in his production? Like, do we need to put any kind of asterisk with this? Because I think, and I'm not even saying that this is untrue, but I think people look at this and say like, oh, the Sharks stink. When he ends up on a better team, he's going to be with better players. In some regard, that might be true, but he's also playing with a legit number one center and a defenseman who's putting up points at a rate that we haven't seen since, Ray Bourque or whatever. So is there any concern with that in terms of like maybe any kind of drop off moving forward? And like, how much is he actually driving the bus in terms of his own point production?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest point in his favor is that this year he's played pretty much in the entire season with Hertl, but last year it was like he kind of went back and forth between Hertl and Couture. It was like he had like and the thing was, it was like he played 20 games with Couture and Logan would have like a run, like he'd be like, oh, look at all the way, and then he'd play 20 games with Hertl and it'd be like, oh, now Hertl's having it. It's like it was like he was the common denominator. It was like whichever one was they have two good centers and they have one really good wing, and whoever the wing was playing with was the good line that night. A lot of nights.
Seems like David Quinn has abandoned the Meier Couture. For the most part,
only been a couple games. Yeah,
interesting.
But he does play a lot with Erik, and I mean, there's no question that it looks like a different team whenever Karlsson is on the ice versus when he's not. But I think Timo Meier has a lot to do with that too.
Great.
His numbers away from Karlsson are definitely better than most of the other guys on the team. Put it that way.
There you go.
So, Corey, what do you think the asking price for Timo Meier would be if you're Mike Grier, if you're the Sharks? And has that changed in recent weeks, given the amount of first rounders and trade packages that we've seen kind of flying around for guys like Bo Horvat and Ryan O'Reilly, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the most interesting part of the process so far, is like the Bo Horvat trade happens and you're like, oh, like that's a pretty good trade package. It's not great. It wasn't overwhelming. Okay. And then also like just, who is a better player, Bo Horvat or Timo Meier, is a pretty interesting conversation. Like they're pretty close. Like one's a center, one's a wing, but one's a better version of the wing. Anyway. So that was like, well, if they got exactly that for Meier, it's, it would be good, but not great. And then the Ryan O'Reilly thing was like, well, that seemed like a lot for Ryan O'Reilly, given what the year that he's having. But also there was all the cap gymnastics involved. So, I mean, I think the biggest thing that is probably like the biggest thing in Mike Grier's favor is just it seems like there are more and more teams. There's just, I don't know if there were necessarily going to be 5 or 6 teams that were going to be in the mix for Ryan O'Reilly or Bo Horvat, but it certainly seems like there's at least that many that could make a real push for Meier. And in that case, then, it seems like, I think that sort of the expectation has been there's going to be a first round pick. There's going to be a high end prospect. And I know like Pierre LeBrun has reported that they want at least 3 things. So I think how good the first prospect is and how good, if the pick is definitely a first, is going to determine how, maybe the third thing is something interesting or just a third thing.
Is there any chance that they keep him? Like whenever the dust settles on March 3rd, is there any possibility that he's still in San Jose?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a non-zero chance just because
That's the nature of things. Yeah.
Right. Well, no, yeah, but they have, they have his rights for next year. I think you can just look at the DeBrincat trade from last draft and say, well, if they don't get exactly what they want, just wait until Nashville and somebody will come along. And I mean, for specifics, like now that the Blues have kind of come into the center of this thing, I mean, the most interesting thing that the Blues have is their first round pick, which right now would be like the ninth.
3 of them.
Yeah. But the one that they're picked, the one that is like not at 25 or 28 or whatever, like that is going to be there in Nashville too. So like if they don't get exactly what they want now, they could definitely just keep talking to the Blues and work out something with them, the day before the draft or the day of the draft. But the thing is, like he's the most coveted player and there's a bunch of teams that want him and the team is pretty motivated to do it. Like I would say there's a very likely chance that it's going to happen.
Okay, so let's go into some of the potential trade partners then. And let's start with the Blues because they're a team that's kind of popped up in the last week or so since the O'Reilly deal. Like now all of a sudden the Blues have 3 first-round picks and they've got some young players like Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou who fit like a new window for them. And Timo Meier conveniently fits in that window. So now all of a sudden it's like, oh, Blues make a ton of sense. Like, what do you think? And I know you had a story, Corey, with JR from St. Louis. So what do you think about the fit or the potential fit between the St. Louis Blues and the Sharks for Timo Meier?
Yeah, I mean, I think they make a lot of sense just because, like, I think Sean and I were actually talking about this offline like 2 days ago. Like what Doug Armstrong's idea of like, hey, let's just turn these 31-year-olds into first-round picks and then turn the first-round picks into 26-year-olds. Like, that's pretty smart. And like more teams should probably try to do that instead of like completely yo-yoing from we're all in to we're all out. Like maybe that's the middle ground. But yeah, I think they have like the Blues have 5 very interesting things. They have 3 first-round picks and they have 2 very good prospects. And like,
yeah, I saw you mentioned Snuggerud specifically. We know he like leveled up. It seemed like at WJC, like he took some steps forward in terms of the public and maybe private perception of him. He seems like him and Bolduc, right, were the guys that you mentioned in the story.
Yeah, and I think I think if you look at this draft, people seem to think it's pretty deep. So like on one side of things, the Sharks would probably like to have pick their own guy at whatever 23 or 25 or 26. Right. But if you're comparing like this year's like 20 to 30 or last year's 20 to 30, I think they would rather have their guys pick their own guy in 2023, except for him. I think he's like the one guy that has like kind of risen above that group to where it's like, okay, he's worth more than the 25th pick in the draft this year.
The really interesting thing about the Sharks to me is like and I think you kind of got into this in a couple minutes ago. There's no real with the Blues rather. There's no real urgency with them, right? If anything, it's more beneficial for them to like the fit in the offer in St. Louis. It's tough to imagine that changing in 3 months, versus today, right? If anything, it's like you can account for the fact, like maybe St. Louis would say, like, all right, we just want to make sure that we don't miss the playoffs and win the lottery, like just to make sure that doesn't happen. We're gonna hold off here maybe, and then, but it's tough to imagine the offer for them materially changing, in the next few months because they're not doing anything this year, anyways.
Right, and I think, I mean, well, 2 things. One, like the Blues aren't going to trade that pick without protecting it from the lottery. Like, so it's going to be top 2 or top 5 or whatever. And then the second
top
thing
one.
Is, top 1, right? And then the second thing is, they also to make Meier fit for the next 8 years, they probably still need to do some tinkering. They've got a couple of less than ideal contracts on the blue line. Maybe one of those gets shipped out. So it's
they have a few, several.
Oh.
Yeah. This is the other kind of late comer as far as the Meier Derby is concerned. Vegas, we mentioned them earlier, cleared up some cap for the summer. That was a necessity for them to really seriously be in on it. They did that with the Shea Weber contract dump with the Coyotes. They have draft capital, 1st and 3rd in 2023. They don't have a great prospect pipeline. what do you think of the fit there, and what do you think of the push that we've seen? It seems like over the last 48 hours from them.
Yeah, I mean, they're the one. They don't. If you look, if we're lining all these teams up together, they're the one that just doesn't have like the obvious, like, okay, here's what they would offer, right?
Yep.
But they're also the team that just seems to figure out a way to be involved in all these things. So I'm sure that there were probably people that didn't think that Mark Stone, like they were going to get Mark Stone with what they actually traded for him. So I would say that I would be very surprised if they were like, the favorite at this point. But like it just seems like that's their MO, is they just always hang around, and maybe at the last minute, if the other teams don't make the big push that they were supposed to, then they just sort of swoop in and say, okay, yeah, we'll take them for this price.
What's the equivalent of, like, what would that look like? What's the word? Okay, we're going rogue for a second, because this is something Sean wanted to bring up, actually, because this is the time of year we do Who Says No's, and fans are just going wild online with trade proposals. Like the Eric Brandstrom in a second, I think, was it, for Mark Stone, it's like a fan proposal, right? Like that's what that would look like now if we saw that. Like, what's the funniest or best trade proposal you've seen online for Timo Meier?
Oh,
I know you've been I know you've been tracking these.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, it looks bad now too, because Brandstrom hasn't really panned out, but he was like a really, really, really good prospect. It would be, that wouldn't be like Luke Hughes in a second, but it'd be pretty close. Well, anyway, the Devils ones are all pretty interesting.
Are you saying Luke Hughes is a bust already?
No.
Corey?
I'm talking about like where they oh god, no, I spent enough time dealing with the Luke Hughes discourse my previous show.
That was
this
fun.
is a question specifically about the Devils. Like we can just say that this question's in there because of Devils fans, because I saw some myself that are just bananas, like really funny proposals.
Luke Hughes is going to be a very good hockey player. I don't know. Let's get that out there. They're they have the most stuff. Like they have the deepest collection of goodies that they can offer. But that doesn't mean that there aren't fans out there that still want them to trade, like Yegor Sharangovich, Kevin Ball, and a first round pick. And it's like, oh, that's probably not.
Yeah, but it's a first round pick.
But yeah, that's probably not going to do it. But there's this whole. I don't know if it's the most interesting or the most frustrating. I guess it depends on the day. Part of this whole thing every year is like you get to this point and it's like, okay, so Luke Hughes is untouchable. Okay, that makes sense. Let's say Simon Nemec is untouchable. Then Alexander Holtz is untouchable, and you just keep going down the list and like, okay, but you can make
prospect hugging season, baby.
Yeah, right. You can make all those guys untouchable, and you can also not get. You can also be the runner up in every trade. So yeah, no, I think they're, if we like, they're the team they're still the team that makes the most sense. Like he would fit absolutely perfectly there. He would be great for them, and they have the ability to sign him long term. They might need to do a little, they do some massaging of that contract and just for Brad's contract, but they can make it work. And they would be, a pretty scary team with him playing next to Jack Hughes or Nico Hischier. And they, like I said, they're the one team, like out of all these teams that we're talking about like their very best prospects, no question, on the table. The Devils can take their top two guys off the table and still have
that because they're that good and can still offer. Is there anything in particular that has stopped Timo Meier from getting traded to the Devils already? Like we've heard them connect with him for weeks. Like what is there anything
and they do have the
in
most
particular
offer.
that's holding it up? Is it the contract? Is it the trying to work and get something done before the deal is actually consummated?
Well, there was a report from a guy who covers the Devils who, he said that Mike Grier has been asking for Dawson Mercer. And whenever the first story I wrote about Timo Meier and the Devils, God, it feels like 2 months ago, but I think it was like 3 weeks ago. That was the thing that I wrote in there, was that should be the first player they should ask for ahead of Alexander Holtz and ahead of, I think even ahead of Nemec is Dawson Mercer. He's a 21-year-old who is already a really good NHL player, and he's going to be a very, very good NHL player and
center capable too. I believe he played a lot of it last year. I know that.
Yeah, he's definitely like a future 1A, 1B captain center. I honestly, like, I think I mentioned this to someone the other day. Like, he kind of reminds me of Logan Couture. Like, I think they kind of play similarly. And like, if he has that type of career, I think that would be a pretty good comparable for him. So, but I'm sure the Devils don't want to trade him. I mean, he is their, however you want to line up their best young assets. Like, it's Jack Hughes 1, and then Luke or Nico Hischier 2, and Jesper Bratt, like all those guys. Like, they don't want to trade. I'm sure they don't want to trade Dawson Mercer, but if it comes down to it, and there's 4 different teams, all with pretty good offers on the table, Meier is obviously going to try to squeeze what he can out of everyone. So, I think that's
he's just doing his job, basically.
Yeah,
that's what this boils down to. Is the Meier is done? He's not doing anything that he doesn't need to do.
Right.
No. Can we circle back on that? Sorry, Corey. No,
I was just going to say it's his it's his first trade deadline. It's first year on the job. He's kind of starting. Nobody wants to call it like a full rebuild process, but they're clearly moving away from this core of players that they've had for the past 4 years. Yeah, resetting, reloading, many rewords. Anyway, this is his. We can talk about all the other people that they could trade, but this is his meal ticket to making this, getting this thing off on the right foot, is to getting,
as much as he possibly can.
Two really good things for Timo Meier, like a really good prospect and a good first round pick, and yeah.
Do you say no? Like, if you're the Devils and Mike Grier is saying, I don't want Nemec, I don't want Mukumadulin, I don't want anything, I want Dawson Mercer. If you're Tom Fitzgerald, do you say no? Sean or Corey? Corey, you can answer this too.
Sean. Yeah.
I'm just listening here. I don't know this. I'm not Tom Fitzgerald. What do I look like here? I'm not bald.
I mean, I think in a normal situation.
That was out of pocket.
He's bald. Tom Fitzgerald's bald. Whatever. Nothing wrong with it. I'm not.
I'm also bald.
I know you came home. I know.
Yeah. Actually, Tom and I, last time I saw him, he and I actually talked about head shaving tips or
man,
or whatever. Yeah. Anyway,
it's a more complicated situation than I was under the impression that it was.
Honestly, I did not do it for like almost a year because I had like done some research and I was like, man, this is gonna be too much work. Like, I'm just gonna keep letting it look like crap up there and not work. But no. So, yeah, no, but it was worth it. Anyway, if I was Tom Fitzgerald, that's a tough one. Let's put it this way. If Dawson Mercer was playing for Vegas or Carolina or Winnipeg or any of the other teams on this list, I would definitely say no. Like, because I think he is like a inner circle core player on a normal roster. That said, like the Devils
on that team, in that pipeline, like maybe less so. He's more fungible than the other ones.
Yeah, he's never going to be more than a wing or the third center, and he's never going to be the captain in New Jersey. They have Hughes and Hischier and Bratt, and if they're going to build everything around those 3 guys, those guys are all not big.
This is spicy. I like this. Yeah. I didn't realize that Dawson Mercer's factored as significantly in here as you're telling me.
I think that's a significant piece of this, is the size of the Devils core. And I don't want to sound like that boomer who's just like, we need big hockey man in New Jersey here. But that is something that I have personally heard as well. This particularly came up with Johnny Gaudreau in the offseason, and people were floating like, do you really think the Devils need to add another skilled, quick, small forward? Right. Like, they need to get some size in there, and Timo Meier would obviously check that box. Yeah, he's not a traditional power forward, right? But he at least brings a bit more size to the table.
No, I mean, he doesn't fight much. He fought once this year, but like he does the
no one fights anymore.
No, he does do the he puts a defender on his back and uses his rear end and
his butt.
Yeah, keeps him out of the way, and he does all the like
Sean.
Cheeks are hip.
Yeah. He does all the like modern power forward stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Great.
So I also too, I was thinking about this the Sharks just played the Sabres like the last game or 2 games ago, and like the Sabres are humongous.
They're
Like
enormous.
They have so many tall dudes,
Uh-huh.
like so many big dudes. And so I was just immediately, I'm like, because my brain wanders during games. I was like, man, what would an Eastern Conference final between the Devils and the Sabres look like? That would be pretty fascinating. So like, yeah, that would be a reason to have him on their team for the next 6 to 8 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move on to Winnipeg. Sean and I were debating this a little bit. It sounds like they're a potential option, but they're probably a team. Like the Jets are really interesting in the sense that they could be a team that could be in flux in the next year or two. Pierre-Luc Dubois, restricted free agent. Everyone keeps talking about, is he going to force his way back home to Montreal? Mark Scheifele only has 1 year left on his deal after this, so next year's his last year in team control. Same with Blake Wheeler. But like Timo Meier could offset those losses, right? Like he could be part of a new core. But I think they would want a long-term contract before they make a move like that. What do you think, Corey? What's your sense or your take on Winnipeg as a potential option?
Yeah, I know. I mean, on paper, they make a lot of sense. Like, I think I had done a story like, maybe in November or December, way before all this really kicked off, where it was just like, okay, let's look at all 31 teams and see where would he fit. And 3 of the teams that made a lot of sense were Winnipeg, Buffalo, and Detroit. And none of those 3 teams have really been super in this so far. But they have, like, Buffalo and Detroit have like the same, like they're on the way up and they have all the assets that they could trade. But Winnipeg makes a lot of sense because, like you said, he could basically join the current group that they have and make them quite good. And then, whether it's if Dubois leaves or if Wheeler leaves, like
they have a lot of money. They have a lot of money coming off. Like whether it's this offseason or next, there's going to be the space necessary. To do the deal.
So they were one of the few teams where it was like he fits right now, he fits in the future. But they also haven't necessarily been a team that's been like super willing to just like push all the chips in and make this kind of trade either.
They've also got the Jets. Their prospect pool is 13th in Scott Wheeler's most recent rankings, but they have 3 kind of top tier guys, which is interesting, especially if that's like we've said, and I know Pierre reported it, and you said it too. They want 3 elements, right?
Yeah.
And if that's the framework that we're working under in your Winnipeg, you have Chaz Lucius, you have Rutger McGroarty, and you have Brad Lambert, who are 3 forwards who are all at the top of to varying degrees at the top of Scott's rankings there. So there are high end players there that would be appealing to the Sharks in a way that say like. Does Vegas have that? Like, I don't, probably not in spades, not 3 of them. That's for sure. So the choice gets a little bit more interesting with Winnipeg.
Yeah. And, and from Winnipeg's end, like if they move one of those guys, well, I mean, one of those guys might be as good as Timo Meier someday, but Timo Meier might be that guy for the next 5 years. So, yeah, no, I think they would definitely, maybe they're just kind of lurking in the weeds, but there hasn't been a whole lot of chatter about them so far.
Interesting.
Okay, let's go to the final one, which is the Carolina Hurricanes. We know that they have a philosophy of do not overpay for rentals. Timo Meier is not a rental. And they have cap space to re-sign him. Like they could pallet the $10 million qualifying offer, though we should mention, this is always something that happens, particularly on social media when people start talking about qualifying offers. That doesn't mean that Timo Meier is going to sign a deal for $10 million.
Right.
We saw Matthew Tkachuk did not, Matthew's QO was 9, but then you go and you sign a long-term extension and your cap hit's not always going to be exactly what your QO is. That's like only if he signs a 1-year deal. Like they sign his qualifying offer. It's 1 year, $10 million. So we're not saying that's going to be what
He's not going to
happens
sign
here.
for 8 years and $80 million. Like
no,
not by a matter of fact. Like who knows?
But,
I guess. But
if that is what they do, I think the Carolina Hurricanes could afford it in terms of their cap situation. Do we like Carolina, Corey?
Well, they seem like
that's a no.
Good,
just kidding.
No, they seem like a pretty good option at first, but yeah, they're they have one or two guys that are interesting. They have a lot of guys who are interesting, but one or two guys that would sort of fit
Move the needle
at the level, the level that we're talking about here.
Mhm.
And the one guy that was really interesting, like literally, sorry guys, I'm coughing again.
That's okay.
The day that Max Pacioretty got hurt, or the day after that, or whatever, I was like,
Mhm.
oh, they have that Russian defenseman that's not come over for a couple
Mhm.
of years, and that would be an interesting thing, like just because, like, maybe the Sharks don't need that guy to show up right away, and just the timelines for both things sort of fit, and it's like, yeah, that could be pretty interesting. But then Pierre has already reported that Don Waddell is telling everyone that calls, like, no, you can't have him. So
Right.
after him, it's not quite as deep or interesting as
Mhm.
of a group. But I have seen a couple people think, like, well, if the Devils, if they're asking Dawson Mercer for the Devils, maybe they'll ask for Seth Jarvis.
Mhm.
Which again would be a weird.
Oof.
I think it would be weird for Carolina as a contending team to trade. Like, because those are two good
Mhm.
examples. That's a good example of what I was talking about with Mercer and the Devils. Like, the Devils have three other Seth Jarvises on their team, whereas Carolina doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily. So that would be an interest, like maybe a tougher deal for them to do. But yeah, no, I mean they've certainly been in it for a while, and they're I would say they're probably pretty motivated to do something. They've been trying to break through for a while here. Whenever it was kind of just Carolina and New Jersey, I thought that was a pretty interesting dynamic.
Mhm.
Like like Mike Greer could go to one of those two GMs and be like, okay, if you don't want to trade me X, I'm going to trade him to the other guy, and you're going to
Yep.
play against him for the next 9 years.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of where I've sort of landed with Carolina.
And Carolina's cap situation is, yes, stuff clears next season, but heading into 24-25, they're going to have to worry about extensions for Sebastian Aho and Brady Shea and Brett Pesce and
Yeah.
Teuvo Teravainen, maybe if that's still in the cards.
But maybe
for them,
the cap will go up to $90 million by then.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's definitely gonna happen. It's not just fantasy land bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But no, it is funny. It's been funny because we have it drilled into our heads, right? That Carolina Hurricanes, like a certain type of player who's signed to a certain type of contract with a certain type of contract situation, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is Timo Meier, great fit." And it's not as, and it's not that it's a bad fit, but it's also not as seamless, I think, as people maybe thought initially. So glad to hear you confirm this.
Yeah.
I'm correct in my analysis.
Man, the Canes are actually really, I'm going rogue now because I'm looking at Cap Friendly. They don't have a goalie signed for next season.
Jordan
Stahl is an unrestricted free agent.
Matter.
Yeah,
That's
fine. They'll be fine. But they have a ton of,
dude.
they have $30 million in cap space, but they have a ton of work to do.
Right.
I think they are the one team on this whole list, other than maybe Vegas, that's like, if they got him, that would be pretty scary. Like, I think the other teams in the East would be like, oh crap, like, because they're kind of built. The Devils they might still be a year or two away because all these guys have never played in the playoffs before. But the Hurricanes are like, they're battle tested. They're ready to win.
They're ready to roll. Yep.
And we've all been waiting to see what they're going to do to replace Max Pacioretty.
Yeah.
So I think what the Devils and the Canes have in their favor is that they're Eastern Conference teams. Like, I wonder how Mike Greer feels about potentially sending Timo Meier to Vegas and what Sharks fans would think about that too.
It would be weird.
That would be tough.
I think he would probably sort of talk around it by saying, like, look, we're at the beginning of this process and it's going to be a while. But yeah, like, there's no way that they would want to see this guy play for that team specifically, if they were competing with him right now, because that's their, it'd be like the Devils trading Dawson Mercer to the Rangers, or it's maybe not quite on that level, but
brother,
yeah,
close enough. So. Corey,
awesome.
thanks for the time, dude. We know you're busy. You're at Sharks practice. Guys are going on the ice, so we'll let you go and leave you with this. It'll be over soon. 8 days.
Yeah. The Sharks are also retiring Patrick Marleau's number this weekend, so it's a busy time.
You said that. I didn't realize you got a Patty Marleau event that you got to go to here in a little bit too. So there you go. Other things are happening. It's not just Timo Meier. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Corey.
Right, thanks for having me.